Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me from where and what time you're watching? Thanks. Everything started out normal enough. The tree was already up, its branches weighed down by a lifetime of mismatched ornaments. My mom was in the kitchen making her famous cinnamon rolls. The whole house smelled like sugar and spices, the kind of smell that makes you feel safe. My best friend Noah was spending the evening with us. He'd come over to exchange gifts. After we opened them, we retreated to my room to hide from the noise of our families laughing and talking. Noah had this way of making even the most ordinary night feel like an adventure. I always got this thrill when he showed up, like something wild was about to happen. Turns out I was right, just not in the way I expected. We'd barely sat down when he leaned in close, his eyes shining with that mischievous energy that always meant trouble. "Hey, have you ever heard of the Night Man?" he asked, like it was a secret he'd been dying to share. I frowned, half laughing. "The what?" "The Night Man," he repeated, lowering his voice for dramatic effect. "My uncle told me about him. He's this thing that comes for kids who screw up around Christmas, kids who don't behave." I rolled my eyes. "Okay, sure. Like some weird, evil Santa?" "Kind of," Noah said, clearly enjoying himself. "But way worse. Like he doesn't just leave coal. He takes you." I snorted, trying to act unimpressed. But there was something about the way he said it that sent a little shiver down my spine. Noah had always been good at telling spooky stories. Too good, really. "All right, so what's the deal? He just shows up if you're on the naughty list or something?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "You have to summon him, like deliberately. But only if you're brave, or stupid, enough to try." That caught my attention. "Summon him?" I repeated, my eyebrows shooting up. "How?" "At midnight," Noah said, his voice dropping even lower. "With a candle and a mirror. You have to say his name 3 times. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Wow, that's original. Did your uncle steal that from a horror movie?" "Laugh all you want," he said, grinning. "But it works. Or at least that's what my uncle says. And tonight we're gonna find out." I blinked at him. "Wait, you're serious?" "Of course I'm serious," he said, already standing up. "Come on, it's Christmas Eve. What better time to see if the Night Man's real?" "Noah," I said, half laughing, half panicking. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." He turned back to me, smirking. "What? You're scared?" That did it. I wasn't about to let him call me a coward, not when we'd been best friends since kindergarten. "Fine," I said, reluctantly getting to my feet. "But if we get caught, I'm blaming you." He just grinned wider. A few minutes later, we were in the tiny guest bathroom at the end of the hall. It was the kind of room no one really used. Small, cold, and a little creepy, with an old mirror that had warped edges. Noah lit a candle he'd grabbed from the living room. The flame cast weird, flickering shadows on the walls. I swallowed hard, suddenly wishing I'd just stayed in my room. "All right," Noah whispered, setting the candle down on the counter. "Let's do this." I hesitated. "Are we really?" "Come on," he said, cutting me off. "It's just a stupid story. What's the worst that could happen?" I wanted to argue, but instead I took a deep breath and nodded. Together we faced the mirror, our reflections looking pale and uncertain in the dim light. And then we said it. "Night Man, Night Man, Night Man." For a moment, nothing happened. I let out a shaky laugh, already turning toward Noah to make some sarcastic comment, when the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound exactly. More like the silence itself had shifted, growing heavier, thicker. The candle flame sputtered, and the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. "Noah," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Cut it out. I'm not doing anything," he said, his eyes wide. That's when I saw it. A faint movement in the mirror, just behind our reflections. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then it grew clearer. A figure. It was tall and thin, with hollow, sunken eyes and a mouth that stretched into a grin far too wide for its face. Its skin was pale, almost gray, and its clothes hung off its frame like tattered rags. The figure tilted its head as if it was studying us, and then it moved closer. The grin widened, revealing sharp, glinting teeth. My stomach turned to ice, and then it raised a hand. Slowly, deliberately, it tapped against the inside of the mirror. The sound was soft at first, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap. "Noah," I croaked. "Blow out the candle." Before he could move, the thing lunged forward. Its hand smashed through the glass with a deafening crash, sending shards flying everywhere. The fingers were impossibly long, tipped with claws that looked like polished metal. It grabbed Noah by the wrist, pulling him toward the shattered mirror with terrifying strength. "Help me," he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. I grabbed his other arm, pulling with everything I had. But the thing was too strong. Noah's feet slid across the tile, the claws dragging him closer. I could feel his hands slipping, growing colder in mine. Then, out of nowhere, my mom's voice called from the living room. "What's going on in there?" The figure froze, its head snapping toward the door like it had heard her. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, its grip loosened. I yanked Noah free and we stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind us. We didn't tell my mom the truth. Instead, we mumbled something about roughhousing and accidentally breaking the mirror. She didn't press us, but the way she looked at us like she knew there was more to the story made me wonder if she'd heard about the Nightman too. A few days later, my parents boarded up the bathroom. "It's just for safety," they said. But they never fixed the mirror, and we never talked about it again. Noah and I drifted apart after that. I'm not sure if it was the fear or just the weight of what we'd seen, but something between us changed. Even now, years later, I can't look into a mirror late at night without thinking about that grin. And every Christmas, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, just in case, because I know what I saw. It was Christmas Eve and the campus was a ghost town. Most students had already left for the break. They had gone off to spend the holidays with their families, friends, or anyone. But not me. My circumstances didn't exactly come with invitations or warm reunions. I told myself I didn't mind staying behind. The solitude would be nice, I thought. A chance to recharge, relax, and maybe binge some shows in peace. But as the hours stretched on, I realized I hadn't been honest with myself. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. I had been trying to sleep, though trying was generous. My room was dimly lit by a single string of Christmas lights I'd hung around my window. Their soft glow felt comforting in the way only cheap decorations can. I just pulled the blanket up over my shoulders when I heard it. A knock. It wasn't loud. Just 2 deliberate taps against the door. But it startled me anyway. My heart thudded as I lay there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. No one was supposed to be here. Maybe I'd imagined it. But then it came again. This time there was no mistaking it. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice was shaky, despite my best effort to sound calm. "It's me," a voice replied. It was muffled but unmistakable. At first, the words didn't register. I sat there, gripping the blanket, my brain sluggishly piecing things together. Then it hit me. Ryan. Even now, just saying his name sends a shiver down my spine. I hadn't seen him in months. Not since the university had barred him from campus after everything he'd done. For weeks, he'd followed me everywhere. It started small, with texts that I ignored. Then came the notes slipped under my door, the waiting outside my classes. The night he showed up at my dorm drunk and shouting my name was the final straw. The school finally stepped in, issuing a no-contact order and banning him from the premises. I thought that would be the end of it. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked. I forced my voice to steady. "I thought you'd be lonely," he said. His tone was disturbingly casual. "It's Christmas, you know. A time for togetherness." I sat up, clutching the blanket tighter. My mind raced. My phone was on the nightstand, and I grabbed it, quickly dialing the R.A.'s number. She wasn't the most reliable person, but I didn't know what else to do. The call rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Of course, Lily had gone home for the holidays like everyone else. "Go away," I said, louder this time, trying to inject some authority into my voice. The doorknob rattled. My breath caught, and without thinking, I jumped up and shoved my desk chair under the handle, wedging it tightly. "You shouldn't shut people out," Ryan said. His voice was disturbingly calm. "Especially not on Christmas. That's not very kind, is it?" The hours that followed felt like years. I stayed on the bed, knees hugged to my chest, straining to hear a sound from the hallway. Nothing. I told myself he must have left. He couldn't still be out there. At some point, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted off into a fitful sleep. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke with a start to the sound of breaking glass. The cold hit me first. It was sharp and biting as it swept into the room. I sat up, my heart pounding, and turned toward the source of the noise. My window. It was shattered. Shards of glass glittered on the floor. And then I saw him. Ryan was climbing through the window. His movements were slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. His face was pale. His eyes were wild. In his hand, glinting faintly in the glow of the lights, was a knife. "Nowhere to run," he said. His voice was sing-song, like a nursery rhyme. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the wall, my mind racing. My phone was on the desk, too far away to grab. The chair under the door suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I was trapped. Ryan stepped closer, his grin wide and unhinged. "I knew you'd be here," he said. "Christmas is about love, about being with the people who matter most." "Get out," I choked out. My voice was barely audible. He didn't listen. Instead, he crouched, tilting his head like he was studying me. "You shouldn't have ignored me," he said softly. "We could have been so happy." Panic surged through me. My hand shot out, grabbing the nearest object, a ceramic mug I'd been using to hold candy canes. I hurled it at him. It hit his shoulder and shattered. He stumbled, just for a second, but it was enough. I bolted for the door, tearing the chair aside, but before I could open it, his hand shot out and grabbed my arm. I screamed, twisting and kicking, but his grip was iron. The knife slashed toward me, and I felt a searing, burning pain in my side. I staggered back, clutching the wound. My hand came away wet and sticky with blood. Ryan laughed, high and broken. "If we can't be together in life," he said. His voice trembled with emotion, "then we'll be together in death." I don't remember much after that. Everything became a blur of adrenaline and cold, of pounding footsteps and the sound of his voice echoing in the hallways behind me. "Come back," he called. "It's Christmas. Don't you want to spend it with me?" I turned a corner and collapsed, my legs finally giving out. The world spun, and for a moment I thought this was it. Then I heard him again. His footsteps, slow and steady. Ryan knelt beside me. His face was calm, almost serene. "It's okay," he murmured. "This is how it's supposed to be." And then, to my horror, he raised the knife. Not toward me, but toward himself. "No," I screamed. But it was too late. The blade sliced across his throat. Blood sprayed across the floor as he crumpled beside me. His hand reached out as if to touch mine. Even as his eyes dimmed, his lips curled into a peaceful smile. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. Someone must have heard the noise. A janitor, maybe another stranded student. The doctor said I'd lost a lot of blood but would recover. Ryan survived too, though barely. He was arrested in the ICU, and when I returned to campus weeks later, everything looked normal. My window was fixed. The decorations were still up. The world kept turning like nothing had happened. But I wasn't the same. Every Christmas, I still hear his voice in my nightmares. That calm, sing-song tone. That awful, high-pitched laugh. Ryan got 15 years in prison, but it doesn't feel like enough. The bookstore always had this strange stillness in December. It felt as if the cold seeped in through the cracks and silenced even the quietest sounds. You'd hear the occasional rustle of a page or the creak of an old shelf. But mostly it was the kind of quiet that made you notice your own breathing. They tried to liven it up for the holidays. Strings of cheap tinsel looped over the shelves. A gaudy plastic Santa perched on the counter. A half-hearted playlist of Christmas carols hummed faintly in the background. But it didn't help much. The air still felt heavy, like the season had forgotten to bring its usual cheer. That day, I was standing near the register. I was cradling a cup of coffee that tasted more like ash than caffeine, pretending to rearrange a display. Not that anyone cared. The place was dead, as it always was on cold December mornings. And that's when she walked in. Her name was Emily Parker. She worked at a boutique right across the street. It was a little shop with bright windows that always smelled like lavender and something faintly citrusy. Everyone knew Emily. She was one of those people who seemed to carry the sun around with her, even in the middle of winter. She'd walk in, flash that easy smile, and suddenly the whole room felt a little lighter, like spring had peaked in early. We weren't exactly friends, but we chatted whenever she stopped by, which was often enough that I'd come to expect her breezy, "Hey, how's it going?" on slow afternoons like this one. That day, she looked a little tired, but still managed to give me her usual grin as she strolled in. Her coat trailed snowflakes onto the worn carpet. "Hey," she said. She brushed off the flakes. "Got any good mysteries to recommend?" I glanced up from my coffee, smirking. "Mysteries? Come on, it's Christmas. You need something warm and fuzzy. Maybe one of those over-the-top holiday romances." She rolled her eyes so dramatically I couldn't help but laugh. Please. I'd rather gouge my eyes out with a candy cane. Suit yourself, I said. But if you change your mind, I've got a stack of them in the back. She laughed, shook her head, and promised to stop by again before the holidays to properly restock. And just like that, she was gone. The bell over the door jingled faintly as it swung shut behind her. She never came back. Christmas Eve at the shop was always painfully slow. Most people were either cozied up at home or elbowing through frantic crowds at the mall. The bookstore, with its dusty corners and lingering smell of old paper, wasn't exactly a hotbed of last-minute shoppers. I spent most of the day half watching the clock, counting down until I could lock up and head home. Around dusk, just as I was debating whether to bother finishing my cold coffee, a couple of police cars screamed past the window. Their lights flashed. Their sirens cut through the quiet. It wasn't unusual. Holiday emergencies, drunk drivers, whatever. But something about the way those sirens lingered in the distance made my stomach tighten. I brushed it off. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew. The boutique was swarming with police when I got there. Its cheerful glass doors were flung wide open, letting in the biting wind. A single strand of fairy lights hung limply from the frame. It swayed like it had given up. Outside, a small group of employees stood huddled together. They clutched their coats like they were trying to hold themselves together. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were wide and glassy. My heart sank. I didn't have to ask what happened. The look on their faces told me everything. The details came in pieces over the next few days. Each one was more horrifying than the last. Emily had stayed late that night to close up, alone, while snow dusted the empty streets. A man dressed as Santa had been seen hanging around earlier in the evening. He waved at shoppers. He handed out candy canes. No one thought much of it. It was Christmas after all. The last time anyone saw Emily, she was locking the boutique's front door. Her crimson sweater was bright against the snowy backdrop. By midnight, the lights were still on. A couple walking their dog noticed and decided to check. What they found, I still can't think about it without feeling sick. She was in the stockroom. Blood pooled around her. It was smeared across scattered wrapping paper and shattered ornaments. She'd been stabbed 11 times. And on the wall, written in uneven black spray paint, was one word: naughty. The police were quick to reassure everyone. They had leads. They said they had suspects. They had a plan. But I'd worked security in another life, and I knew what it looked like when a case was going nowhere. The man in the Santa suit, gone without a trace. The boutique's cameras, out of order. Witnesses, either clueless or unreliable. By New Year's, the investigation had stalled completely. Emily's family, her parents, who had been planning to spend Christmas morning with her, were left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. And I was left with this gnawing guilt I couldn't shake. I kept replaying our last conversation, wondering if I'd missed something, some sign that might have warned me what was coming. But there was nothing, just her laugh, her promise to stop by again, the soft jingle of the bell as she left. The package arrived in early January. Emily's father called me. His voice was shaky as he explained. An unmarked envelope had shown up on their doorstep. Inside was a cassette tape and a single note. Listen closely. I drove over that night. The three of us crowded around their old tape player in the kitchen. The air was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. When the tape clicked to life, my blood ran cold. The voice that came through was calm. It was almost cheerful as it described every gruesome detail of Emily's last moments. It laughed, a low, sickening chuckle. It ended with the words, "Merry Christmas to me." The police brushed it off as a prank, but I knew better. Whoever made that tape knew things no one outside the investigation should have known. Emily's parents begged me to help. They asked me to do what the police couldn't. I didn't want to. I wasn't a detective. The thought of getting involved terrified me, but I couldn't say no. For weeks, I dug through everything I could find. The tape, Emily's social media, her photos. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found him. Daniel Hartman. He'd been in her classes, always in the background of photos, always wearing that stupid Santa hat. He transferred to a university 2 states over, the same one Emily had been planning to attend. And when I finally tracked him down, I wasn't surprised to find him working as a mall Santa. He lived alone in a dingy apartment. His life was a far cry from the vibrant world Emily had inhabited. I staked out his place for days, waiting for something, anything, that might confirm what my gut was screaming. One night I saw him dragging a heavy bag to his car. My breath fogged up the window as I snapped photos. My heart pounded. But when I tried to follow him, my car wouldn't start. Someone had tampered with it. The closer I got, the more dangerous it became. A week later, I found a note on my door. "Stop digging, or you'll end up on the naughty list." I should have stopped, but I didn't. I handed everything I had to a journalist friend. I told her to publish it if something happened to me. Something did. My apartment went up in flames one February morning. I barely escaped. That was the last straw. I packed what little I had left. I changed my name and disappeared. Emily's family never got closure. Every December, when the decorations go up and carols fill the air, I think about her. And I wonder if the man in the Santa suit still walks among us, laughing, knowing he got away with it. You know how Christmas Eve is supposed to be magical? For me, it was supposed to be a little different that year. I'd promised Mom I'd be back by Christmas morning, but I had a plan to squeeze in one last adventure. My friends and I decided to ditch the usual small-town routine and make a break for Portland, a road trip we'd talk about for years. The tree at home was already lit, glowing with those classic white lights Mom insisted on every year. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and chocolate. Sam, my little brother, was buzzing around, already hopped up on sugar cookies and Santa fever. It was cozy and perfect, the kind of scene that belonged in a Hallmark card. But at 17, I thought I was too old for all of that. I wanted something bigger, louder, something different. So I told Mom I'd be home in time to open presents. Just one night, I'd said, what could possibly happen? The four of us, me, Nate, Kara, and Liam, loaded up my old sedan that afternoon. It wasn't much of a car, just a clunky silver thing that rattled every time it hit a pothole. The trunk was stuffed with blankets, a bag of snacks, and a thermos of my mom's spiked eggnog, which she'd winkingly labeled Special Reserve. We were chasing a dream of Christmas that felt a little less predictable, a little less boring. Portland, with its sparkling city lights and bustling markets, was the perfect escape. The plan was simple. Drive 3 hours on snowy back roads, stop at a cheap motel, and then finish the trip the next morning. Easy. And for the first couple of hours, everything went smoothly. The roads were icy, sure, but we didn't care. We blasted Christmas songs, screaming the lyrics until we were out of breath. We made fun of Nate's Christmas sweater, a ridiculous, jingling monstrosity with glitter and reindeer antlers sticking out of the shoulders. He wore it like he was auditioning for a holiday sitcom, leaning into every joke with exaggerated pride. When we pulled into the motel lot, though, the holiday cheer took a nosedive. The parking lot was packed. The windows were dark. There was this sad little sign taped to the front door, "No vacancy. Merry Christmas." "Well, that's just fantastic," Liam muttered, slamming his door. Kara sighed loudly, crossing her arms as she gave me that look. "The one that said, 'Really? You didn't plan for this?' I guess we could sleep in the car," I offered, trying to sound upbeat. "There's a rest stop just a few miles back. It's not like we're picky, right?" No one loved the idea, but what choice did we have? We piled back into the car and headed for the rest stop. It was even less appealing than I'd imagined. A small lot with a few vending machines, a picnic table buried under a foot of snow, and a line of dark woods looming at the edge. The air was so cold it felt sharp, like it was cutting through our coats and scarves. The place was dead silent, eerily so, like the world had hit pause. We decided to make the best of it. Nate passed out first, curled up in the back seat with his sweater jingling softly every time he shifted. Kara sat in the front with me, scrolling her phone, her face lit up by the glow of the screen. Liam stretched out across the back, sipping eggnog and telling me about the Christmas party his cousins were throwing next year. Something big, fancy, and definitely indoors. For a while it felt almost normal, like just another late-night hangout. Then, sometime after midnight, Nate shook me awake. His face was pale, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Hey," he said, glancing nervously at the woods. I gotta pee." "Then go," I muttered, pulling the blanket tighter around me. "I don't want to go out there alone," he said, his voice cracking just enough to make me open my eyes. He was staring at the trees, his breath fogging up the window. With a groan, I grabbed the flashlight from the glove box and shoved it into his hands. 5 minutes, I mumbled. "And don't wake up a bear or something." He forced a weak smile and trudged out into the cold. I closed my eyes again, but the quiet started to gnaw at me. After a few minutes, I sat up, frowning at the dark outline of the trees. "Nate?" I called, my voice low. No answer. I called again, louder this time. "Nate, come on. This isn't funny." The silence stretched on, and my stomach tightened. Then I heard it. Footsteps, fast and frantic, crunching through the snow. Nate burst out of the trees, his face pale, his chest heaving. "Start the car." He gasped, his voice barely holding together. "We have to go." "What happened?" Kara asked, blinking awake as Liam sat up behind her. "Just drive," Nate shouted, scrambling into the back seat. That's when I saw him. A man stepped out of the woods, his long coat trailing behind him, his face hidden in the shadow of his hood. His hands were what froze me. They were dark, slick with something that could only be blood. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The car lurched forward, skidding on the icy lot as we sped onto the road. "What did you see?" Kara demanded, her voice rising with panic. Nate was shaking so badly he could barely speak. "There was a guy," he stammered. "In the woods, he was stabbing someone. Over and over. There was blood everywhere." The car went dead silent. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw them. Headlights. A van, barreling down the road behind us. "Is that him?" Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. The van sped up, closing the gap between us. Then it hit once, twice, slamming into our bumper. Kara screamed as I fought to keep the car steady. Nate was yelling something, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of my own heartbeat. The third hit sent us spinning. The car veered off the road, flipping twice before landing in a snowbank. For a moment, everything was still. "Get out," I shouted, fumbling with my seatbelt. The sharp, acrid smell of gasoline filled the air as we scrambled out of the car. Bruised, bleeding, but alive. The van had stopped at the top of the hill. For a second, I thought he was coming for us. But then, without warning, he turned and sped off into the night. We huddled together in the snow, shivering and too shaken to speak, until a trucker stopped and called the cops. Nate told them everything. The blood, the body, the man in the woods. When the police searched the area, they found the scene exactly as Nate described, but the body was gone. The news called it a gruesome Christmas Eve mystery. The victim was later identified as a man involved in a bitter property dispute. The suspect? Never caught. These days, Christmas doesn't feel the same. The lights don't sparkle like they used to, and I can't drive past snowy woods without seeing shadows that don't belong. Every year when we get together, we talk about that night. Every year, it feels just as raw. Some stories never really end. That Christmas, we learn just how fragile life is, how fast everything can change. I never thought Christmas would become a day I'd never forget, a day that would leave a mark on my heart and mind forever. It wasn't the way I'd imagined spending it. I doubt anyone else would have pictured it either. Christmas used to be my favorite time of year. It was filled with laughter, lights, and that warm feeling of everything just fitting together, even when life felt messy. When I was a kid, Christmas wasn't about the gifts or the food, though don't get me wrong, those were always great. It was about the way the world transformed for just a little while. The twinkling lights on every house. The way the air smelled like pine trees and cinnamon. The music drifting out of stores. Something about it made everything feel magical. It was like the world collectively paused its chaos to celebrate something good. But this Christmas, this one was different. It was the first one after we'd left Eric, my stepdad. It wasn't just leaving, it was escaping. Mom, my little sister Lila, and I packed what we could into garbage bags one night and drove until we felt like we were far enough away to breathe again. 3 towns over wasn't exactly a new world, but it felt like one. We ended up in this tiny apartment on the edge of town. The paint was peeling. The plumbing had a mind of its own. The neighbors weren't exactly friendly, but it was ours. For the first time in years, it felt like we had a shot at building something better. Mom was working herself to the bone, 2 jobs, barely enough sleep, but she still managed to keep everything going. And Lila, well, she was 12 and full of that boundless energy only kids seem to have. She'd been counting down the days to Christmas since Halloween. We didn't have much, but Lila didn't care. She threw herself into decorating, spending hours hanging up old ornaments on the little fake tree we'd bought secondhand. It was missing a few branches. The lights only half worked, but she made it beautiful in her own way. Mom did what she could to make the season feel special too. Between shifts at the diner and stocking shelves at night, she managed to scrape together enough to put a few presents under the tree. I didn't need to ask how. Mom had a way of pulling off miracles even when the odds were stacked against her. You could see the exhaustion on her face, the way her shoulders drooped when she thought no one was looking. But every time Lila laughed, every time she squealed about Christmas, Mom smiled like it was all worth it. And honestly, maybe it was. Christmas Eve was simple but perfect in its own way. We had hot chocolate. Lila insisted on extra marshmallows, store-bought cookies, and a marathon of cheesy holiday movies. The three of us piled onto the couch under this old quilt Mom's grandma had made. It was fraying at the edges, but it was warm. It felt like a little piece of home. We laughed so hard at the ridiculousness of it all. The over-the-top decorations, the impossibly perfect families, the predictable happy endings. For the first time in months, it felt like we could finally breathe. Then came the knock. It was past midnight, Christmas Day officially. At first I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but there it was again, louder this time. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp and deliberate. I glanced at Mom. The look on her face told me she was thinking the same thing I was. Nobody should be knocking at this hour. Stay here, I said, getting up. I don't know why my chest started tightening, but something about it felt off. The kind of off that makes your skin crawl. I crept to the door, the soft glow of the porch light spilling in through the peephole. When I looked, my stomach twisted. It was Eric. He stood there, his face half lit, with a grin that sent chills down my spine. Snow clung to his black coat. In his hand was something heavy, a crowbar. My breath hitched. I turned back to Mom, my voice barely a whisper. It's him. Her face went pale. Lila froze beside her, her big brown eyes wide and brimming with tears. But Mom moved fast. She grabbed her bag from the floor, the one she never let out of her sight. Inside was her dad's old revolver. She'd carried it with her ever since we left Eric, just in case. She pressed the gun into my hand, her voice low but steady. Take Lila to the bedroom. Lock the door. Don't come out unless I tell you. Mom. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not leaving you. You are, she snapped, her eyes fierce. Go. Now. I didn't have a choice. I grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her to the bedroom, locking the door behind us. She clung to me, her whole body trembling. Is he going to hurt her? She whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A loud crash shattered the quiet, the sound of wood splintering. My pulse skyrocketed. Through the door, I heard Eric's voice, low and menacing. You thought you could run from me? Take my kid? On Christmas, no less. His laugh was cold, like he enjoyed the fear in his voice. You're mine, and you'll always be mine. Then came the sound of a struggle, thuds, grunts, glass shattering. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I pulled away from Lila and looked her in the eyes. Stay here, I said, my voice shaking. Don't unlock this door unless it's me. No, she whispered, grabbing my arm. Don't go. Please. I'll come back. I promised, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. I unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway, the revolver cold and foreign in my hand. Each step felt like it stretched on forever, my legs unsteady beneath me. When I reached the living room, the scene hit me like a punch to the gut. Eric had Mom pinned against the wall, his hand around her throat. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead. She was fighting, kicking, clawing at his arms, but he was too strong. The crowbar lay forgotten on the floor beside them. Let her go, I yelled, my voice cracking as I raised the gun. Eric turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as his grin grew wider. Look at you, he sneered. Think you're a tough guy now? What are you gonna do, kid? Shoot me. I'll do it, I said, though my hands were shaking so badly the gun wavered. Then do it, he taunted, stepping toward me. Come on, show me what a hero you are. He lunged. Instinct took over. I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The recoil slammed into my hands. Eric staggered, his expression twisting in shock. I fired again, and again. He collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across the carpet. For a moment, everything went still. My ears were ringing. The world felt distant, surreal. Then I heard Mom's voice, hoarse and trembling. You saved us, she whispered, her hand finding mine. The sirens came next, wailing in the distance. When the police arrived, I was still sitting on the floor, the gun in my lap. They questioned me for hours, but it was clear. I did what I had to do. That Christmas, the tree still blinked in the corner, its lights cheerful and oblivious. But nothing about it felt the same. Mom's cuts and bruises are healing. Lila is starting to laugh again. And me, I'm trying to make sense of it all. I know what I did was necessary. I know it saved my family. But late at night, the memories creep in. The smell of gunpowder, the sound of the shots, the sight of Eric lying there. This Christmas wasn't about magic or joy. It was about survival. And survival comes with scars, ones I'll carry with me, always. You ever have a night that just sticks with you, no matter how many years go by? For me, it's Christmas Eve, about 5 years ago. Every December, when the snow starts falling and Christmas lights go up, I can't help but think about it. The whole thing still feels like a bad dream, but I know it happened. I was there. I had volunteered to work that night, not because I was feeling particularly generous or anything. I just needed the money. You know how it is. Rent doesn't take a break for the holidays. I figured delivering pizzas on Christmas Eve wouldn't be so bad. People tend to tip better when they're full of holiday cheer. Honestly, the roads were quiet. It seemed like an easy shift. I was halfway through my night when the order came in. One large pepperoni, no special instructions, to a townhouse on the edge of town. The address was in this neighborhood that felt straight out of a Hallmark movie. You know the kind. Big houses, yards covered in snow, every window glowing with warm light. There were wreaths on every door and inflatable snowmen waving from front lawns. I even passed a group of carolers bundled up in scarves, trudging through the snow. It was almost annoyingly perfect, like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. When I pulled up to the house, I had to double-check the address because, honestly, it looked like something out of a Christmas card. Lights were strewn everywhere, glowing in soft white and blue. A massive inflatable snowman stood in the yard. The front door was framed with garland and twinkling lights. There was even a nativity scene on the lawn, complete with a glowing baby Jesus. It felt so warm, so welcoming. I remember thinking, this is going to be the easiest delivery of the night. I grabbed the pizza and knocked on the door, taking a moment to breathe in the crisp, pine-scented air. When the door opened, the man standing there looked exactly like someone you'd trust with your kids at a holiday party. He had this easy, fatherly smile, a cozy sweater, and glasses perched perfectly on his nose. Behind him, the house was glowing with soft, golden light. I could hear Christmas music playing faintly in the background. "Thanks for coming out tonight," he said, his voice warm and full of holiday cheer. "The pizza's for my wife. She's been under the weather and hasn't had much of an appetite, poor thing. I thought this might cheer her up." He sounded so genuine, so normal. Maybe it was the Christmas spirit or just the way he seemed so sincere. But when he asked if I could bring the pizza upstairs to her, I didn't even think twice. Normally, I'd draw the line at stepping inside someone's house for a delivery. But this, it felt different, like he just needed a little kindness. And it was Christmas, after all. "Sure," I said, stepping inside. "Where's her room?" "Second door on the left," he said, still smiling. "She'll be happy to see you." The house was warm and smelled amazing, like cinnamon, nutmeg, and a hint of something woodsy, probably from the fireplace crackling softly in the living room. As I climbed the staircase, I couldn't help but notice the family photos lining the walls. There were so many of them. Vacation shots of a couple in matching ski gear, kids tearing into presents under a massive Christmas tree, even one of the man cradling a baby in his arms. It all seemed so perfect, almost too perfect. When I reached the second door on the left, I knocked lightly. "Pizza delivery," I called out, trying to sound cheerful. No answer. The hallway was so quiet I could hear the faint rustling of the trees outside. I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. I hesitated, feeling a weird twinge in my gut. Eventually, I cracked the door open. "Hello," I called softly as I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It wasn't strong, but it was off. A mix of lavender and something sharp, almost metallic. It clung to the air, making my stomach churn a little. The room was dimly lit, and as my eyes adjusted, I noticed the strangest thing. Air fresheners. Dozens of them, strung from the ceiling and sitting on every available surface. It looked like someone had raided the entire stock of a hardware store. And then I saw her. She was sitting in an armchair by the window, her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening to the faint strains of Silent Night playing somewhere in the house. Her skin was pale, too pale, and stretched tightly over her cheekbones. Her hands rested on the armrests, perfectly still. Her whole body was still. Too still. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't moving. She wasn't alive. The pizza box slipped from my hands and landed with a dull thud on the carpet. I wanted to run. Every instinct in me was screaming, "Get out now." But I couldn't move. I was frozen, my eyes locked on her lifeless form. "You found her, didn't you?" a voice said from behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The man was standing in the doorway, his warm, fatherly smile completely gone. His face was blank now, almost hollow. "She's been so quiet lately," he said, stepping into the room. His tone was calm, almost conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "It's been hard for her. You understand, don't you?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat was dry, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. "She loves Christmas," he continued, his eyes drifting toward her. "The lights, the music, the joy. It's just a shame she couldn't make it downstairs to enjoy it this year." I took a shaky step back. "I think I should go," I stammered, my voice barely audible. His hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "But you haven't said goodbye," he said, his voice low and insistent. "It's Christmas. You can't leave without saying goodbye." That was it. I yanked my arm free and bolted past him, down the stairs as fast as I could. My heart was racing, and I could barely see through the blur of panic. I didn't stop until I was outside, the icy night air hitting me like a slap. I ran straight to my car, started the engine, and sped off without even looking back. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. The officers didn't laugh or brush me off. They promised to check it out, but I never found out what happened. I didn't want to know. Now, every Christmas I think about that house. Every time I catch a whiff of lavender, my stomach twists and the memories come rushing back. Christmas is supposed to be a time for joy and warmth. But for me, it'll always carry the faint, sickly scent of lavender and fear. I never thought about Uncle Ray much. He was one of those relatives you hear about in passing. A name murmured in tense conversations, never fully explained. If he had been a ghost, it wouldn't have made much difference. The only things I knew about him came in fragments. He and my dad had some kind of falling out, something bad enough to leave a permanent scar on my family. My mom hinted at it a few times, always in that sharp, cutting way she had, but she never gave me the full story. And when Dad died, quick, violent, and messy, Uncle Ray became just another shadow hanging over the whole thing. Then he disappeared, and nobody spoke of him again. He wasn't just gone, he was erased. So, when a letter about him arrived out of nowhere, I didn't know what to feel. It showed up a few days before Christmas, buried between the junk mail and bills. The envelope was plain, stamped with the name of some law office up in Vermont. I didn't recognize the town. Honestly, I almost tossed it without opening it. It didn't look like anything important, just another piece of paper trying to steal my attention. But there was something about it, something that made me pause. Call it stubbornness or curiosity. Either way, I tore it open. Uncle Ray was dead. That was the first thing I read. He had been dead for a while, apparently. The lawyer didn't bother with any details about how or why, just that he had left something for me, a safety deposit box. To claim it, I had to go to Vermont. That's all the letter said, besides an unsettling little line about the urgency of the matter. I laughed when I read that part. Urgency? For what? The guy had been gone for years, and as far as I was concerned, his legacy wasn't anything I needed in my life. I tossed the letter on the counter and went back to ignoring Christmas as usual. I've never been big on the holidays. The fake cheer, the forced gatherings. It's never felt like something meant for me. My version of celebrating was keeping my apartment dimly lit with a cheap string of lights and curling up with a blanket until New Year's rolled around. But that letter wouldn't let me be. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. Every time I tried to forget about it, my mind kept circling back to that deposit box. What could possibly be inside? Why me? By Christmas Eve, the question was gnawing at me so much that I gave in. I packed a bag, started my car, and began the long, cold drive north. The roads got narrower and icier the further I went. Vermont's back roads felt endless, winding through stretches of snow-covered emptiness. The town, when I finally reached it, looked like it had been forgotten by the world. Small, quiet, the kind of place where the houses seemed to sag under the weight of the snow. The lawyer, a thin man with a pale face and tired eyes, met me at the bank. He handed me a key without saying much. His silence wasn't exactly reassuring. I unlocked the deposit box, half expecting it to be empty. But no, it held something, just one thing. A letter. Yellowed with age, sealed and addressed to me in Ray's sharp, uneven handwriting. My stomach twisted as I opened it. I don't know why. Maybe it was the finality of it. The idea that whatever was inside those folds of paper might tie me to Ray forever. The letter was short. Just 3 words, scrawled in ink that had bled into the paper over time. Burn it all. Underneath, there were coordinates. I stared at those numbers for what felt like forever, my mind spinning with questions. What was it? Why was I supposed to burn it? The lawyer, who had been hovering nearby, cleared his throat and spoke for the first time since handing me the key. "If I were you," he said quietly, "I'd let it go. Some things are better left buried." His words should have been enough to scare me off. They weren't. I thanked him, shoved the letter into my pocket, and left. The coordinates pointed to a spot deep in the woods, not far from where Ray's cabin had been. I knew it was stupid. I knew I should just go home and let the past stay buried where it belonged. But something about that letter, those 3 words, refused to let me walk away. So early Christmas morning, I set out with a backpack full of supplies, a gas can, and a sinking feeling in my chest. The hike was brutal. Snow covered the ground in thick, uneven patches, and the air was so cold it felt like needles on my face. The forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no rustling branches, just the crunch of my boots and the sound of my own breath. I kept checking the coordinates, thinking maybe I had made a mistake. But eventually, the cabin came into view. It looked like something out of a nightmare. The roof sagged under a layer of snow, and the walls were coated in pale, twisting fungi that seemed to glow faintly in the weak light. The smell hit me before I even reached the door. A sickly sweet stench, like something rotting in a puddle of ammonia. I gagged, pulling my scarf tighter over my face. The inside was worse, much worse. The walls wept with moisture, and the air was so thick with fog I could barely see. There was a pot on the stove, its contents bubbling even though there was no fire. Tubes snaked out of the pot, disappearing into the walls like veins feeding some unseen beast. And then there was the sound, a low rhythmic whisper, just barely audible, like dozens of voices speaking at once. On the floor lay a book. Its cover was cracked leather, warped and swollen from damp. The writing inside was jagged and sharp, written in a language I couldn't even begin to recognize. But I didn't need to read it to understand what it was. This was what Ray had left for me to destroy. I stumbled back outside, my chest tight and my hands shaking. The gas can felt heavier than it should have as I carried it into the cabin. Every step felt wrong, like the air itself was pressing against me, trying to push me out. I poured the gas everywhere. On the walls, the floor, the book. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, as I struck the match. The moment the flames caught, the cabin erupted into chaos. The fire roared like it was alive, and the whispering turned into screams. Inhuman, high-pitched, layered in ways that made my skin crawl. Shadows writhed within the flames, shapes that defied logic, defied reality. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could do was stand there, frozen, as the cabin collapsed in on itself. When it was over, the forest was silent again. The air smelled clean, and the snow was undisturbed, as though nothing had ever been there. Whatever Ray had unleashed, whatever he had been trying to contain, it was gone. I hoped. The drive home felt endless. The radio played Christmas carols, their cheerfulness almost mocking after what I had just been through. I didn't sing along. I couldn't stop thinking about Ray, about the cabin, about the things I'd seen but couldn't explain. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore. I don't go hiking either. And if I ever see something strange, something I can't explain, I turn the other way. Looking back, it feels like a chapter from someone else's life. Surreal and distant, like a hazy memory from a dream you're half certain never really happened. I was 22 and freshly arrived in Budapest, still getting used to the city's strange rhythm. There was something spellbinding about it. The crumbling buildings with their forgotten grandeur, the hidden courtyards, the way history seemed to hum beneath your feet wherever you walked. I spent hours wandering its streets, getting lost on purpose, drawn to its shadowy corners like a moth to light, or maybe to the darkness beyond it. That December was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that bites through layers and finds every vulnerable spot. My breath would fog up in the air as I walked, my scarf pulled tight around my face. The holiday lights hanging over the streets were beautiful, but they never seemed warm enough to chase away the chill. It was Christmas Eve when everything fell apart. Though at the time, I thought it was just another night, another adventure. It started with Esther. She was one of the first people I met in Budapest. We'd struck up a conversation in a tiny cafe near the Octagon, one of those places where the coffee is strong, and the furniture looks like it was scavenged from someone's attic. She had this easy confidence about her, the kind of person who could make you feel like you'd known her forever after just 5 minutes. I was drawn to her, maybe because she seemed so sure of herself, or maybe because I was lonely and needed a connection. Any connection. Esther introduced me to her friends, a group she called the Circle, though later I'd learned they preferred the name the Unlit. It sounded dramatic, like something from a bad horror novel, but there was something magnetic about them. They had this air of mystery, like they knew secrets the rest of the world couldn't fathom. At first it seemed harmless. Just a group of people with a taste for the strange and macabre, gathering in crumbling mansions and candlelit rooms to tell ghost stories and share obscure legends. I told myself it was quirky and fun, a way to feel like I was part of something bigger. But the deeper I got, the more I realized their fascination wasn't just for stories, it was for the shadows themselves. And then there was David. If Esther pulled me in, David kept me there. He wasn't the kind of person you could ignore. Everything about him seemed deliberate, from the way he carried himself to the way he spoke, his voice low and smooth, like velvet brushing against bare skin. He was tall and lean, always dressed in black, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something about him, an intensity, a quiet danger, that made it impossible to look away. David had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when he talked to you. But there was always an edge to it, like he was testing you, waiting to see if you'd measure up. "Do you believe in sacrifice?" he asked me once, tilting his head in that way he did, his dark eyes glinting in the candlelight. I laughed awkwardly, unsure if he was serious. "I guess so," I said. He just smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach twist. "Good," he said softly. "You'll understand what it really means soon enough." That Christmas Eve, he invited me to join him on what he called a special holiday tradition. I remember how he leaned against his motorbike, the faint glow of the street lamp casting shadows across his face. "It's something you won't forget," he said, his voice low and almost hypnotic. Against my better judgment, I said yes. The streets were quiet as we rode through the city, the wind biting at my face and slicing through my coat. Most people were tucked away in their homes, celebrating with their families, and the emptiness gave the city an eerie, dreamlike quality. Snow fell in soft flurries, dusting the cobblestones and muffling the sound of our passage. I clung to David as we wove through the narrow streets, my fingers going numb despite the warmth of the engine beneath me. Eventually, we stopped outside a building I'd never noticed before. It was tucked away in a dark alley near the river, its facade crumbling, the windows boarded up. It looked abandoned, but faint music drifted through the cracks in the wood, haunting and classical, like something from another era. David knocked twice on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open. A man I didn't recognize stood there, his face partially obscured by the hood of his long coat. He nodded at David, as if they'd done this 100 times before, then stepped aside to let us in. The air inside was damp and cold, carrying the faint smell of mildew and something metallic I couldn't quite place. The room we entered was small and dimly lit, the only light coming from a flickering projector at the far end. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a handful of people were already seated, their faces obscured by scarves and shadows. The smell of stale cigarettes clung to everything, mixing with the metallic tang in the air. David led me to a chair in the back. His hand on my arm was firm, almost possessive, as if he could sense my hesitation. I wanted to ask him what this was, but something about the silence in the room made my voice catch in my throat. Instead, I sat down, my heart beating faster than I liked. The film began, and at first it seemed harmless. Grainy, black and white footage of a woman sitting in a dimly lit room. But there was something wrong. Her head was slumped forward, her wrists bound to the arms of the chair. She looked dazed, her movements sluggish, like she was drugged. Then a man stepped into the frame, his face hidden by a crude mask. He carried a scalpel in one hand, and in the other something metallic that glinted in the light. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a film. This wasn't art. The woman's muffled cries, the man's deliberate movements, they were too real, too vivid, My hands gripped the armrests of my chair as nausea clawed at my throat. I turned to David, my voice barely a whisper. "We need to leave." He didn't even look at me. "No," he said, his voice sharp and unyielding. "You stay. You watch. This is truth." "I can't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I can't do this." His hand shot out, gripping my arm with a force that made me wince. "You said you'd follow me anywhere," he hissed, his voice low but full of venom. "Don't be weak now." For a moment I froze, too terrified to move. But then something snapped inside me. I yanked my arm free and bolted, my footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. The cold night air hit me like a wave as I stumbled outside, gasping for breath. Snowflakes clung to my hair and lashes as I ran, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. Once inside, I locked the door and slid to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. David didn't follow. He didn't call. In the days that followed, I avoided Esther and the others, unable to face their judgment or worse, their indifference. I didn't have the words to explain what I'd seen or what it had done to me. A week later, I found a note on my doorstep. Just one sentence. "You disappointed me." I burned it. Even now, years later, Christmas brings back memories of that night. But it also reminds me of something else, that no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a way back. Sometimes it's as simple and as difficult as choosing to walk away. The lights might not be as bright as they once were, but I think that's okay. They're enough. And I've learned to find warmth in my own strength, one step at a time. You know, I used to love Christmas Eve. It always felt so warm, so predictable. The lights twinkling in the windows, the smell of cinnamon and pine needles filling the house. Everything about it screamed comfort. But now, every time Christmas Eve rolls around, I get this knot in my stomach. I can't help it. Last year ruined it for me, and it's all thanks to Liam. Liam's my best friend. He's also the reason I've been in more weird, borderline dangerous situations than I care to admit. The guy has a talent for finding trouble like it's his full-time job. So when he called me late on Christmas Eve, I should have known better than to pick up. I really should have. He practically yelled through the phone. His voice buzzed with excitement. "You're not going to believe this. The old Grayson Foundry? It's unlocked." I sighed, already regretting answering. "Liam, it's Christmas Eve. Can't you just watch a movie like a normal person?" "That's the point," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Nobody's around. It's the perfect time to check it out. Simon, it'll be fun." There it was, that word. Fun. That's Liam's magic trick. The way he gets you to agree to the most ridiculous things. You hear him say it, and suddenly you're doing something you swore you'd never do. Which is exactly how, 20 minutes later, I ended up pulling on my boots and heading out into the freezing cold. The walk through town was eerily quiet. Most houses were dark with just the glow of Christmas lights twinkling softly in the windows. My breath puffed out in little clouds. The snow crunched under my feet. By the time I reached the foundry, my fingers were numb despite my gloves, and my nose felt like it might fall off. And then there was Liam, standing there with his flashlight, looking like he'd just won the lottery. "Ready for some holiday spirit?" he asked, handing me a flashlight with a grin that was way too wide for someone standing in front of an abandoned factory. "Sure," I said, shoving my hands deeper into my coat pockets, "because nothing says Christmas like asbestos and tetanus." He laughed and led the way toward the massive, crumbling building. The Grayson Foundry was one of those places everyone in town knew about but never talked about. It had been shut down decades ago after some kind of accident. No one knew the details, but rumors ranged from a deadly explosion to straight-up hauntings. Either way, it had been left to rot. Now its sagging roof and shattered windows loomed against the sky like something out of a horror movie. We slipped through a gap in the rusty metal doors. The cold hit me like a wall. It was somehow even colder inside than it had been outside. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating rusted machinery and piles of debris. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew and metal. Every step we took echoed like a gunshot. "So remind me again why we're here," I asked, already regretting my life choices. "Because it's awesome," Liam said, like that explained anything. "And I've been hearing stuff like weird noises, lights, spooky things." I stopped in my tracks. "You dragged me out here for ghosts? Are you serious?" He shrugged, grinning. "Come on, it's just for fun. You don't actually believe in that stuff, do you?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to admit how uneasy I felt. Instead, I followed him deeper into the foundry, our footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. The place was massive, with long, empty hallways and rooms full of broken tools and shattered glass. Every so often, I'd catch a faint creak or groan, like the building was shifting around us. Then I smelled it. It was faint at first, just a sharp, earthy scent that made me wrinkle my nose. But as we walked, it grew stronger. Something about it made my skin crawl. "Do you smell that?" I asked, my voice low. "Yeah," Liam said, his grin finally fading. "Weird." We followed the smell down a narrow corridor, past rooms that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. The air grew thicker, and the smell was joined by something else, something sweeter, like burning pine needles. It made my chest feel tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. And then we saw it. At the end of the hallway, a faint red glow spilled out from a doorway. It was so out of place, so wrong, that I stopped walking. "Liam," I whispered, grabbing his arm. "This feels bad. Let's just go." But Liam, being Liam, just kept walking. "It's probably just some kids messing around," he said, his flashlight steady as he approached the door. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was small, almost like a storage closet. The scene inside made my stomach flip. Candles flickered in a perfect circle on the floor, surrounding a strange symbol drawn in what looked like blood. In the center of the circle was a bird, its wings bent at unnatural angles, its feathers matted with dark, shiny streaks. The smell hit me full force, burning herbs mixed with something metallic and sharp. My knees felt weak. I grabbed Liam's arm. "We need to leave. Now." Before he could respond, a voice, a deep, smooth voice, spoke from behind us. "Leaving already." We spun around. Two men stood in the doorway, their faces pale and blank, like they'd been carved out of wax. They were dressed in long, dark coats, and one of them was holding a knife, a long, wicked-looking thing that glinted in the candlelight. "Merry Christmas," the taller one said, his voice calm and chilling. My heart felt like it might explode. "Liam," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Run." Liam didn't hesitate. We bolted past the men, our flashlights bouncing wildly as we sprinted back the way we came. Behind us, I could hear their footsteps, heavy and fast, and the sound of one of them shouting. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. "This way," Liam yelled, darting down a hallway. I followed him blindly, not caring where we were going as long as it was away from them. When we finally reached the gap in the doors, I practically threw myself through it, the freezing air hitting my face like a slap. Liam was right behind me, slamming the door shut just as one of the men reached it. For a split second, I saw his face through the crack, pale, furious, and lit by the flickering red glow behind him. His eyes locked onto mine. It sent a shiver down my spine. "Go," I shouted, grabbing Liam and pulling him toward the field. We didn't stop running until we reached his car, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. He fumbled with his keys. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting those men to burst out of the shadows at any moment. But the field was empty. The foundry was silent. As we sped away, the reality of what we'd just seen started to sink in. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing with questions I didn't want answers to. "What the hell were they doing in there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those candles, that strange symbol, and the pale faces of those men. Christmas morning came and went. It felt hollow, like all the joy had been sucked out of it. Liam and I haven't talked about it since. I think we're both too scared to. Some things are better left forgotten. But every time Christmas rolls around, I can't help but think of that foundry, of what we saw, and of what might still be happening there. Don't forget to check out these videos. Thanks for watching.